G'day guys, welcome back to this episode of The Money Mindset. I'm your host Tony Aquino, and today I had a quick little chat about the Australian residential housing crisis and my thoughts on how I think we could fix it. There's not really a resolution, but it was more just a chat, a little quick chat on what I thought was necessary. I don't think it's actually going to be fixable, but just relating a few things to prosperity and how to grow as a human being, and how that ties into the housing market and how that affects everyone, and how unaffordable housing might hinder that process. So it's a little bit of a shorter one today, but hope you enjoyed this one. And if you like this content, please like, share, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya. Okay, what is my thoughts on the Australian residential housing crisis, or the residential housing affordability, or the Ponzi, or the ridiculous price that Australian real estate is? What do I think the cause of this is? So I would say, as I've mentioned in a lot of previous episodes, it's the money system. So if you haven't watched any of the other episodes, please go and watch them. But essentially, the money system is forcing everybody to spend their today dollars today instead of saving them for the future, because the way that the system is designed, the fractional reserve system, it is designed to make people spend their money today because it's more valuable today than it is tomorrow. Now, how does that relate to Australian real estate? Australian real estate is one of the, I could say, it's got this dogma that it's one of the safest assets to put your money. So it's a really good investment. Yeah. So over the last 40 or 50 years, we've started treating our housing as a investment and not a basic needs thing, like water, safe shelter, warmth, and keep us dry. So I was thinking, my wife said to me, do you know the I don't know, can't remember, it was the pyramid of Maslow, the hierarchy of needs, that's what it is. And it's got all those, if anyone hasn't seen that, it's a basic human needs, sort of basics, and it goes through the functions on, what people need, or what humans need to thrive and survive. And the base layer is like, just standard, like, food, water, and shelter. And then it goes up into, once you've achieved that and you're stable, you can venture out into the next aspect of, growing, and you can start to create shelter. Once you've got shelter, then you can start to find, a life partner, and you can create a family. Once you've created a family, then you can start creating wealth. And then there's that pyramid that goes up. But she was telling me that a lot of people now have this pyramid's upside down. So people were first searching at the top of the pyramid. There's like wealth, generational, like wealth. Like once you've got all those pillars and you get to the top, you start saving your wealth, like for your future generations. So they've already got those building blocks, and then that's how society grows. So I started thinking to myself, because I'm quite obsessed with the money topic, I was thinking to myself, shit, that's like, that makes a lot of sense in the way that the pyramid's upside down, and a lot of people were trying to accumulate the money now before they try and build the pillars of just standard good food, good shelter, good oxygen, and then finding a relationship, love, and all those other things. The pyramid's backwards, so people are trying to achieve the money first. And I truly believe that it's because of the money system, because the fractional reserve system is based on debt, and the way that we acquire our wealth, if we don't invest our wealth, which most people don't know how to invest, they instinctively, without even knowing how the system works, they know that things are going to get more expensive over time. So regardless if they know the system or not, they need to spend they have the urge to spend their money on something today. So how does this all relate to Australian real estate? So it got me thinking, if we're on a debt-based system, then obviously everyone needs to purchase something today rather than tomorrow, because wages don't keep up with inflation. We've gone through all that, how inflation's not really at 2 to 3%, even though they claim that they're trying to keep it there, because gold's never exceeded a 2% increase in supply, so they try to keep the inflation rate at 2% so that we are sort of on the gold standard. But when you're on a fractional reserve system, you're borrowing 10 to $1. It doesn't make any sense. So what I'm trying to relate to Australian real estate, or any real estate in that matter of fact, is people need to park their money somewhere. And it's a forever, the debt system is forever impoverishing the next generation. So we buy a house for, let's just say $500,000, and it appreciates to $1 million, which is, I always say appreciate with my eyebrow raised, because it's not appreciating. It's not going up in value. But people have that perception, right, that their house is going up in value. And everyone says, around the barbecues and the family barbecues, oh yeah, you've done so well, you bought so well. It's like, well, everybody bought well, and then every boomer, I'm mid-30s, every 35-year-old, did they buy good as well? All it does is, when you sell that house, you're just impoverishing the next owner, as long as they've got a mortgage for it. Obviously, if there's people that are buying a property with cash, then yeah, that doesn't impoverish those people, because they are living a debt-free life, and that's fine as well. But for the most people, if I sell my house, if I bought it 10 years ago and I bought it for $500, I did pay principal and interest or whatever for that 10-year period. I might have dropped that loan down from $500 down to maybe $450 after a 10-year period. I would have paid maybe 50 or 60 grand off the principal. So if I now sell that house for $1 million, because it's my own house, the government allows me to have capital gains tax free. So now someone else that buys my house has to get a $1 million loan, and now they are paying a $1 million loan off over a 30-year period minimum if they don't refinance it. And for my freedom, someone else has to be impoverished for 30 years. So that's where I'm going with this. That it doesn't. The more and more I go down this rabbit hole, the more and more it doesn't sit well with me. But I'm not trying to fight the system. That's just what it is. I'm just trying to explain to you guys, the way my brain thinks. And people think they're doing so well, but it's like, I've also got young kids. I've got kids that are less than 10 years old. So us doing that and saying we are doing so well, and some people might not be fortunate enough to have parents that can get them into the housing market. And the further and further we go down this road, the more and more if my kids want to buy houses when they're 20, they're not going to be able to afford them. They really aren't. And then the whole Maslow hierarchy of needs, that's the whole family piece, right? So if you if they they say, oh, you will be able to afford a house because you'll be able to just go out to these new areas. But the thing is, like, that new area might be 1.5 hours away from where I live, and I don't want to be that far away from my kids. They need to have. I'm listening to that book, and then like the pillars of growth are like, he relates it way back to being a kid. Like, the kid will keep looking around for its mum, and then eventually, if it feels safe enough, it'll say, okay, like, I'm going to try and stand up and walk, and if I don't, then they might catch me. So if you have that confidence, you can step outside your comfort zone and try and achieve the next pillar. But if you don't have that fallback, you might not even have the courage to make the leap forward. So the way that I see it, with the way that Australian real estate's going, it's like a policy thing. So we can keep pumping the housing market and keep like acting like it's okay for like things to go up in value, but the way that I don't know, it's just the way that we have to think about the way that this system's created. It's not, like, for me to go sell my house for, let's just say, for that example, say if it was $1 million and I've made a $500,000 profit, now I have $500,000 cash. Someone else has to. I didn't get $500,000 cash because I was smart or something. It's because now someone else has that mortgage. Do you know what I mean? And the only reason why the house went up in value is because they printed and stimulus, and the way the system works is they keep on reevaluating things, and then, it's now worth this amount of dollars, and then they keep giving new loans and new loans and new loans. And I'm not saying it's going to collapse, but I just think it's morally, we need to move more forward from this. So I'm going to move on a little bit from this chat. But the way that the Australian real estate, I personally think the way you would change the affordability, it cannot happen overnight, because everyone's wealth is now tied up in Australian real estate, and that's basically how the Australian economy, sort of thrives and survives. It's all based on debt. But at a certain point, like, if you have a $500,000 loan, the interest at 6% is $30,000. But if you have $1 million loan, the interest on that's $60,000. Now, at some point, we're going to have this point where we catch up, like, with discretionary spending and your wages. When a house used to be, let's just say, $100,000, and the interest was 17%, it's $17,000, but their wages might have only been, $40,000, but it's still like less than 50% of the wage, even though the interest rates are at 17%. So at some point in time, people like, this is why people now, this is such a big topic now, because people that are like, we've gone from one income, like the dad, or mostly the dad going, the mum being at home, and you'd have your one income, you'd be able to afford your house in a couple of years, you'd be able to pay it off, you'd be able to go on your family holidays and stuff. Now we've moved to 2 wages plus side hustles, and we're buying a smaller house, and it's costing more. So we'll keep just dumbing down the house, and we'll keep adding the side hustles until, it's all good until it's not. It's all good till it's not good. So I don't know how you fix, like, in a perfect world, if you were to just like flick a switch and say, like, things that I would suggest is, you have to try and, not that I don't believe the government should even get involved in the free market, but because they keep pulling the strings on the housing market, they manipulate it. You know, they always want it to go up. So instead of a recession, they'll let people in, and they'll keep that supply and demand very unimbalanced on the side of growth. So same as in America, that's not housing there because their housing market's not like ours, but theirs is the stock market. So everyone invests in the S&P there. Their S&P is manipulated, for sure. They push and pull laws and regulations to manipulate so people get that 10% return, at least so that the citizens, the majority of them, don't lose their wealth thanks to the fractional reserve system. The way that I would reckon you would have to start addressing the housing crisis, or the dogma of actually, like, the, you know, housing is actually parking your money in housing. That's what's making it unaffordable, is regardless if you're an investor or if you're a homeowner. If you're a homeowner and you're like, these bloody investors, and they're like making everything so unaffordable and negative gear this, and, you know, jacking the rents and all these things, just ask yourself, if you're one of those people that say that about investors, then don't put your money in real estate. Maybe go rent a house and see, you know, because you're essentially doing the same thing. You know, people that buy their own house, they're not trying to, they're also like greedy landlords, really, but except you're the renter, you know what I mean? So like I was saying in one of my other videos, like, if you rent off a landlord or you own your own house, if you rent, you know, you're paying your $2,500 a month to the landlord. If you're a homeowner, you're paying your $2,500 a month to the bank as the interest payment. So it's the same thing, but everyone's trying to invest their money so it can hold its value in this fucked up system that we're in. So yeah, I would say, rule wise, you'd have to really have like some drastic changes. You'd have to, as bad as it sounds, because everyone's like got that dogma of, like, you know, it would never happen, because if you wanted to really solve the housing crisis, you would say, all right, we're not, you know, any capital gains on any house, you have to pay tax on that. So you could imagine if that was a rule that the government implied. I'm not saying you should or shouldn't imply it, but this may be these are the sorts of changes that you would actually need to make. So if you had, you know, that as a rule, like capital gain. So if your house appreciated from 500 to $1 million, and then you went and sold that, and you had to pay, out of that $500,000 gain, you had to pay 250 grand to the government. Maybe you might think, actually, I don't want to park my money here in this asset. You know, how do you feel? How do you feel that? How would you feel if you had to give 250 grand to the government? So then maybe I'm not sure if this is correct thing. I'm just spitballing here. Just leave it in the comments below if you think I'm wrong, or, like, you know, leave it in the comments. Like, you know, we could work through that. You know, like what people think and why you think it's a good thing or why you think it's a bad thing. I'm not necessarily saying I have a solution. I'm just spitballing ideas on rules that if a government wants to actually change the housing, you need to change that it's not an asset class. Housing shouldn't really be an asset class. We should, you know, say, if they could implement that and say, look, we're going to start taxing everyone capital gains on any house, and you'll get a bunch of houses that go on the market, and all that tax revenue that they make, they could use that and actually create real projects here. They could spend, you know, they could. This is a beautiful country. We could create more tourist stuff. We could, you know, that we're using that money to create more growth and create more people to spend money in our country, and invite people to come here. They're the sorts of rules. If you give the Australians a different thing to invest in, they won't invest their money in housing. And there won't be this big, huge problem. You know, people that know me, they were like, oh, you know, why why would you, you know, are you worried that you're investing in property and this and that? And I'm like, what if it crashes? I'm like, good. Like, if it crashes, yeah, I'll lose some money, but it doesn't bother me. Like, I'd be happy if housing was 100 grand for one house, because people that have skills will benefit, and that would encourage more people to get skills, because someone that does a retail job might be on 30 or 40 grand a year. Someone like myself that's got a trade, you know, we could be on 100. So like my wage would be able to afford one house. My wife would be able to stay home with kids, no daycare, and we could start building those blocks and start living a prosperous life. But I just, yeah, I don't think it'll change, but yeah, I think that people have this twisted reality that there's a lot of finger pointing. So yeah. Anyways, I'm gonna leave that there, guys. I think a little bit more deep and meaningful in this one, but yeah, I think the housing crisis is what it is, and is I'm gonna start bridging this into the next few episodes. I'm gonna maybe start talking about the dreaded cryptocurrency, the Bitcoin. So I'm still learning about that. So hopefully, if anyone wants to listen to that, then I'm sure that you might learn a thing or two. So anyways, hope to see you in the next one. See ya.